Welcome to KIMEcast, where we break through and cut the BS in sports medicine, rehabilitation, and sports performance, and talk about how things really work. Welcome to KIMEcast. I'm Tony Mikla, here with my guys Evan Hogger, Aaron Crouch, Russ Dunning. We're going to take you through a couple more steps here today on some ACL Part 2. So we're going to dive into our scorecard and really how we evaluate someone's ability to really progress and return to sport through this process. So this is something we worked hard on. It's actually really cool. I think a collaboration of efforts and a lot of experience coming into making this thing happen. But again, first things first, Ev, what are we gonna drink here?
All right, so we're going with the classic Sacramento. This is Track 7 Brewery in Sacramento in the kind of Land Park area is their main brewery. They opened a really good restaurant too, by the way. It's on, I can't remember what it's called. It's on Folsom Boulevard. This is the Panic IPA. It's a 7%er. So we didn't really do a rinse on this, but I think we're good to go right over top. Right?
Yeah, super informative.
You're always in the know. You know? You're always in the know.
Yeah.
When it comes to Sacramento.
Oh, Jenny.
Love it.
Nice.
Hey,
They're corner, we're wasting it.
First timer.
Classic.
She's off camera here.
Gotta use the-
laughing at us. This is good.
It's all part of the experience.
It's all part of it.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right, well, we get this figured out. Let's talk about something that we understand better.
Yeah, right. No kidding. So ACL Scorecard, which I think is a fun topic and it's a hot topic, especially in the ACL rehab world. I feel like I can't really talk about our scorecard itself until I talk about its origin a little bit, just because I played a big part in putting it together, mostly for my own ease of mind. Because when I first started and I had my first couple ACLs, the hardest question to answer for me was, hey, when can I go back to my sport? When can I go back? And for me internally to give an honest answer to that individual is say, you know what? I'm releasing you to go full go, no restriction, and I promise no re-tear on my watch as long as it's the non-contact type of re-tear. For me, that was hard to say. Really hard to say because I didn't feel like there was any concrete information that I could give them or test them with at the time to really truly say that. And it really kind of brought on this need to create this scorecard that encompassed all different facets of the challenges they're going to face on the field and the court. And so kind of dove pretty deep into some different research that's out there, you know, from the jumping stuff to maybe a little bit more new age things into the fatigue and then typical strength and stamina tests. And we birthed this amazing tool that to date we've used at 6 months and 12 months. We've communicated with patients and communicated with their parents and are able to definitively say, you are ready because you did these things. You developed yourself in a strength manner, a movement manner, a speed and impact, a power, and a sport capacity in a way that I feel confident you can go out there and not injure yourself.
Super well said. I think the key there is you learn in like school, they give you, here's one test. Here's the triple hop test. Here's the,
I'm going to pour myself. Don't worry about it.
Careful there, buddy.
It's okay. Foam still tastes good.
So, I mean, there's triple hop. There's all these tests where you say, like, here's this one test, here's the whatever sensitivity and this or that. But the reality is there's not one test. There's not one test. We need this comprehensive thing of tests. I think that's Aaron's point here. That's the point of the scorecard is we need this comprehensive look at movement quality, so quantity, quality of movement, strength, power, impact tolerance, sport progressions, like you were saying. I think that's the cool thing about this is that it takes everything into consideration.
It's so true. I think too many people rely on one measure. Yeah. And I think it's really commonly like the triple hop. And what I can't stand about one measure is you're forgetting that athletes know how to cheat. And one of my favorite athletes of all time, Uriah Faber, one of the world's greatest legends in the UFC world and the WC world, he'll say, this is a quote, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And our job as a therapist is to find their hole. And if we give them a triple hop test or a single hop test, I saw a kid with a shit knee dunk off of that leg, proving to me, holy cow, I can't believe you just went to the rim. And he's like all of 5'11". It showed me you can explode off of a leg with a very problematic knee. So to rely on a single power test that incorporates the whole limb is not the right way of doing it. You can cheat that test and you are an injury waiting to happen, which is why we have the scorecard of all those measures that you have to meet. And if we find a hole in it, then sure as hell the court or the field or an offender taking you down is gonna expose you.
Yeah, to give you some background on the scorecard, furthermore, from what Aaron's talking about, is we use it as a 6-month test, could be a 9-month test, 12-month test, and really kind of compare it to some normative data. And we use a variety of validated tests that are out there to put this together and then develop a score for the athlete to say, hey, you're above this score, and therefore you've accomplished a variety of these skills. Mm-hmm. So I think that's great. The piece that leads to this that's super important is that we do the basics up front, right? Mm-hmm. And we set the foundations, and we do a very foundational progression that moves us forward to the point that we can actually do these tests at potentially at 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. So I think that's super important to understand. And we have a few criteria, and I'll give you some examples. So obviously one is full extension and full extension control. And for us to get full extension, we actually ask the patient to lie supine on the table and be able to squeeze that knee straight to the point that the heel actually lifts off the table. So there's actually some clearance. So not only do they have it passively, but they actually have control of it in that range. And that's not to say that they, can tolerate load there or anything, but clearly they have control of extension. They can actually get it. The quad fires through that range. So that's kind of phase one. And then we started to look at their ability to really control strength and have strength endurance, so to speak. And we looked at lots of different stability testing. So we do quite a bit of stability testing, which I think is so far missed in our space, in our field, that people look at how well can you do maybe a leg press test, or can you do how much do you squat, or how high can you jump, are all common tests that we do. But really looking at isometric hold time and hold control, I think, is one of the biggest lacking things that we see. And it's part of our Bulletproof training program and our Bulletproof courses that we teach. I think it's one of the foundational elements. So we do this quite well with the lower extremity, with the knee, with the ACL, looking at the plank positioning, single leg plank holds, from a sagittal plane standpoint, from a frontal plane standpoint, from a posterior line standpoint, looking at a T hold as well, a split squat hold. So a couple different hold tests that we do to really develop this 60-second hold time. I think Russ speaks to this better than most, but this concept of, can you really hold a position, and can that muscle have the endurance to work for that length of time? And it brings in this energy system side of things that, again, is really underdeveloped with our typical rehab routines.
I think it's critical. I think the big thing we say stamina is we mean equal sign mitochondria. And mitochondrial density is the only way we can do repeat contractions. So in other words, to ballistically move, to powerfully move safely, we need to regenerate that energy substrate. Those energy fuels are rebooted in the system because of our aerobic capacity. And that is from mitochondrial density. How many of those buggers do we have in the cells? Mm-hmm. And so we have to exhaust the tissue to near failure to maximize that, which speaks to the BFR strengthening, speaks to why we need to do the stuff early on in rehab so that we don't deplete that mitochondria of the system. That's how we regenerate, and it's how we refuel for all strength, speed, power, sport activity. And we can test that. And it's a very good test because, again, you'll see someone, if they might be able to move well, they might be able to jump, but you challenge them with a 60-second hold, and there'll be a clear difference left to right if they haven't challenged some slow tension. The stamina is the key.
To piggyback off of that, because that's what you define as like local tissue endurance around the injured limb. A big element to the scorecard, which I think it has a tremendous amount of value, is the global recovery of the aerobic and anaerobic systems. So we put in a maximal heart rate test. So we do a 5-minute sled push test to absolute full exertion, and we get their max heart rate as soon as we're done. And then we measure their heart rate recovery within a minute. And so our communication, not only is it kind of emblazed in the PT's mind of like, what's the limiting factor, but our communication to the client is, there are the two biggest reasons why someone gets injured. And one is previous injury, which you can't erase anymore after an ACL reconstruction. And two is fatigue. And so if you're talking about local tissue fatigue, like Russ was saying, or global fatigue, the heart rate recovery after that maximal test will tell you everything. So they should have a heart rate drop in that minute of at least 30 to 40 beats to make you feel like they can go and play, whether it's a full soccer half or a full soccer game or basketball game or whatever it is, that they can last all the way to the very end and not start compensating because their system is so depleted.
And put all of what you guys said a little bit more simply is to say this is like the physiologic foundation that they get to build off of, right? In both from a central perspective and from a peripheral perspective, but it's the physiologic foundation that they then get to build on top of. And so then, that's like this is the slow strength, slow tension kind of hold capacity you're talking about, whole system capacity. And then they get to build their strength, speed, power, all of that other stuff on top of that. So those other pieces of the puzzle don't really come without this. It's like a bottom of a physiological physiologic pyramid.
But where people go wrong is when you don't follow that progression and you say, oh, you passed my basic stuff. Let's start doing a little bit of practice and you'll condition as you play your sport. Are you insane? You're going to put them in the function that injured them to begin with and say, let's get in shape by practicing the shit that got you here. It blows my mind.
It's a strong one.
It's a strong one.
I know. It's starting to get louder.
It's almost like, so it kind of, I mean, I think it's the beer talking because it reminds me of Will Ferrell on Old School where he's just like the debate. And then he just blacked out what happened to what I'm just saying. I think so I think a big like element to the scorecard for me as for myself personally and through my own development and then being around younger therapists is it really kind of guides a thought process too on like where do I need to take this person. It's not you need to take them to pass the test. That's not the point, but it's to make sure that you're accomplishing their development in all different phases of their rehab, that you're not letting deeper movement patterns go by the wayside or have strength endurance go by the wayside or aerobic and anaerobic conditioning go by the wayside, that it forces you to think to allow physiological adaptation to happen.
And it kind of is training to the test though. So kind of opposite what you said in a sense, it is training to the test, right? It's like check boxes that they've got to check along their way. And it lays what you created there lays out this awesome blueprint for any therapist to look at and be like, okay, I know how to build this. I know how to build this. I know how to build this. And it's like literally a step-by-step process. They check this box. There's the next one. They check this box.
And that's why we have tests. I think we have great progressions. We have a blueprint. And then, to be honest, when we do a 6-month scorecard, it's a freaking complex card. I have to use the data sheet. I can't pull that out by memory. So I have to reference the sheet. Yeah. This is going to be 2 testings long. I'm like, oh, crap. You didn't do well on your Y balance. And then it's like, oh, I haven't been having you do enough single leg stance. And that's why we do the test, is because we're not perfect. We're fallible humans. I use the test. I found a hole. Let's address the hole. Let's do more of this. And so I think it's both. We need great programming, and then we measure because we are fallible coaches and PTs. And this is a double check on us.
Keeps the patient in check, right? Because they're going to ask you at that moment or even at 5 months what they've done everything you asked to that point. They move great. They feel great. And you're still causing restriction on their return to play. And it's like 6 months is that common time frame for most get the clearance like, oh yeah, just go right back out there. When we know in the research for a fact that every month you wait from 6 months to 9 months, you reduce your risk of re-injury by 50%. And so it gives them the data under a certain threshold to say, you're not ready, but I know exactly what you need to get ready.
And we talked about this in another podcast, but it is kind of putting it back on them and saying, here are the tests you got to pass. Like, prove it to me. I'll show you how to get there, but this is what you got to do to get to that point. I think another thing that you talked about how it's helped you in your process and other young therapists and other therapists in their process, but this has been an awesome networking tool for us with physicians. Mm-hmm. I think physicians have really, really liked to see all of this objective data. And we have more than one physician that when they send us an ACL asks to see the scorecard, see a 6-month scorecard and a 12-month scorecard because they're expecting it. And they're using this, they're looking at this objective data too, and they're making that ultimate kind of end game decision of, because they don't get to see them on a daily basis like we do. So this is a really cool way that I think we've networked with some docs in the area too.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, some of the tests we talked about, kind of the baseline stuff to build, and then there's obviously some return to sports stuff. Again, mostly validated testing out there. But we talked about setting up that foundational stability endurance work, and then of course the big strength pyramid where we're going to really build some strength in the person. And that's kind of a long process, maybe from month 3 to month 6. We're really focused on strength development, and then we might progress to more of our speed, agility, change of direction, and that type of work over month, between month 4 through month 6, month 7, and beyond is where you're really kind of focusing that in. And then eventually reactive agility whenever that's appropriate, which probably beyond 6 to 9 months in that zone, somewhere in there. So that's kind of the way that the card works as well, is that you have these ways to add more challenging tests as we go. One thing that's in there that's a little bit unique that's probably not as validated and not as out there is we use this hop test, so a double leg hop test over a hurdle. We're using a 12-inch hurdle and having people stand with 2 feet together and then hopping laterally back and forth over the hurdle, and they do that for 60 seconds. So to speak to this idea of endurance, talked about it at the low level. We talked about it maybe a moderate level of this cardiac output, and for like taking them to failure with the sled, which is a phenomenal tool for these guys. But then to actually look at jumping and say, what happens if we're jumping for 60 seconds? You're going to get fatigued. Like, that's not normal in sport, jump for 60 seconds, unless you're Russ from the UFC guys. It's a little crazy. But But for the most part, you might have 15, 20 seconds of exertion and there's a recovery phase. So we want to kind of see what's it like to take you to fatigue, take you to some level of exhaustion. And then let's see, hop over this and see how many times you can do it. So the measure is how many times you can do it in 60 seconds. And I took this working with the San Jose Sharks. I did some work with them as their combine, essentially, back in the day. And they did an 18-inch hurdle and had them jump over at 60 seconds with healthy individuals. And, these NHL guys with quads of steel and ridiculous leg endurance and such were the best guy did like 75. And on the lower end of the scale was around 60 reps. So it was incredible to watch. And, this is something fun for you guys to try at home. Is, set up a hurdle and get over 18 inches is legit. We're using a 12-inch one, and the idea is going to get over and back over 60 seconds, and you get at least 45 plus reps. We'd like to see a 50 or 60 reps, but can you get at least over the 45 reps? And that kind of gives you at least a passing score, and hey, you've met the minimal criteria, and we can challenge it further.
I think another unique test that we have in there you don't see, and I think is sometimes almost a misnomer or like a caution, so to speak, on knee rehab is the step-down test. And for us, the step-down test is defined as taking their absolute inseam measurement, where they stand on one leg, they pull the other knee to their chest, and you measure from the top leg's heel, bottom of the foot, all the way down to the floor. That's how high the box is that they have to step down from without putting any weight into the traveling leg and then bring themselves back out of. That's kind of like your pistol squat. It's like the pistol squat for some reason has this like taboo connotation with it for anyone that's ever experienced a knee reconstruction or
flexion past 90.
No knee flexion past 90, as if that's gonna work when you cut, So but the single leg step down test, I know for a fact when I test someone at 6 months, I'm like, this is the one that's gonna hold you back. That and the hurdle test and probably the sled push to fatigue. But for those listening, if you work in a space that's really small and you want the best bang for your buck, honestly, if you can get a really high box and have them start at the top, lower themselves as far down as they can possibly go, and measure it to their absolute inseam, then that's going to tell you everything you need to know as far as their confidence and their control in one leg, which is where sports happen.
Yeah, I'll say that about strength. That attacks strength. And I think, for anyone listening who's had a horrible knee injury or God forbid, an ACL injury or reconstruction, when you start running, if you have a lopsided gait, if you look like shit doing it, you probably aren't strong enough. And I found that the majority of people that I've coached on the rehab process, if they're doing well with that test, if they're on pace to pass that test somewhere in that 6 to 9 month range, jogging's pretty easy. Running's pretty easy. You don't really have to coach much on, we're going to start cutting. No big deal. Go ahead and touch that cone. Come right back to me. You're going to do it fine. But if you have a strength deficit, if when you do that test, you're only 30% of what your other leg is, running looks like shit. Good luck coaching it.
And it checks a ton of boxes, right? So that deep squat is dorsiflexion out of the ankle in a closed chain position. It's deep knee bend. So we've got hip pass parallel, requiring the quad and the hips to fire very strongly there. I think the other thing we talked about extension on a previous episode, and extension is kind of the problem early on as we're getting more to this return to sport. It's flexion, right? Lack of flexion is what that kind of like loppy gait starts to look like, as if they can't flex all the way as they're coming back through that swing phase, swinging through. That leg is a little bit straighter, there's a lot more drag on it, so that starts to change their gait pattern significantly. So extension is like the early problem, and flexion is like the performance problem.
Yeah, it just kills me though, because so many people focus on cute drills. When if you hit a home run with some great good old-fashioned stability holds, good healthy movement, and load that limb, then really it all doesn't really matter. They look good.
What was the quote? Be savagely good at the basics. Was it Mark Verstegen with Exos? Was harping on that. I absolutely love that quote because that's how I live my life. Like very minimal options, and just like you stick with consistency and you know what works, and it's tried and true. And so, 100%. Like just do the basic things really well, honestly.
Yep, it carries over when it gets done properly. So what else we got? We talked about the some of the isometric tests that we do. I think one of the keys with those ISO tests too is we ask them to hold it for 60 seconds. So that theme kind of recurs, 60 seconds there, 60 seconds of jumping. We're looking at recovery heart rate after 5 minutes, 60-second recoveries. And that shows up a lot in cardiac research as far as the 60-second number. Other tests in there.
So the Kaiser equipment, I think, is unique. We talk about this bigger movement in research to support external cues to drive performance rather than internal cues.
Right.
The Kaiser equipment that we have with the leg press really kind of like helps the client understand where they're at and almost like push themselves. So we use a maximal push test. We compare it side to side just for strength measures, and you want to see what percentage of their surgical limb can push of their normal limb, and typically at that 6-month time frame, they're like 85% or less. And then you take 30% of that and drop the weight down and see how hard and how fast they can move each leg. And you want to get that peak power, and they can see that peak power on the faceplate of the Kaiser, and it's driving how much effort they put in with their surgical leg. So it set the standard with your healthy leg. Say it's 1,000 is their peak power at 30% of the 1 RM. And then their surgical leg is challenged to hit that number. And if it doesn't hit it, it gives a percentage. Then they see it. And then you just you coach them like, let's make it go. And let's see if you can beat that number. And then you actually get a true measure because they're guided by an external cue.
Yeah. It's a great test, but it's also an awesome training tool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You want motor unit recruitment, make them move fast and give them that external cue to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's for our facilities at KIME, that is one of our required pieces of equipment, is have a leg press with this power display on it, because it does this. It's phenomenal for this population of ACL rehab, where we can say, hey, healthy leg, and let's go. How much can you press, period? So we get an absolute strength measure. And then we can also look at a power measure. Now let's drop that weight down. Let's look at your speed and get a power number. Then we compare that to the other side. It's always an eye-opening experience for these folks. Even if, we see it with patellofemoral pain, Achilles, you name it, anything lower extremity, it's amazing, where they're like, wow, like that's just incredibly weak, which then stimulates this amazing commitment to I've got to get this stronger, right? We had a guy, I've used this for years, and it's such a great tool, but I had an older guy who was a doctor. He's actually a physician, plays soccer recreationally, tore his ACL. He's like 40. And it was funny, most of the stuff we got to, he did really, really well. And if you do this well, I think if you do ACL rehab well, by month 3 on, it's really focused on strength, and it's really focused on agility training. And, at his age at 40, the amount of agility work we were doing was probably a little bit less than we would do with somebody who was 18, of course. But yet he was going back to recreational soccer, so we still did a lot of things. But there's this obvious, how much PT do I need, Tone? I understand what you're trying to teach me. I can go do this for 2 or 3 weeks on my own. And great. So we did that, of course. But I told him, I said, hey, when you're driving by the facility at night, swing in, and I want you to hit the leg press, and you're just gonna do your 3 sets and your maximum power output. So you really isolate that limb and get it going. And for him, that's what kept him focused and honest for his entire rehab process, to take this thing for 9 months. You can imagine at 40, 45 years old, and then doing 9 months of rehab, that's a hell of a commitment. When you're 18, it's one deal, or 25 as a pro athlete, or whatever it might be. But to do it in later ages of life, it's just such a commitment. So that was great for him, and it's just unbelievable mental focus. And then it was great to watch him at it. He'd just be in there, just grinding, and he's making noise, whoa, he's like, man, Tony, 85%, almost there. And I'm all right, keep it up, man. You're almost doesn't count, we need to get over that 90 crust.
Yeah.
And it was a tremendous motivation for him, and it was a phenomenal tool, and one I've used many, many times. So I love the Kaiser stuff. I was talking with Dennis Kaiser, with the owner of Kaiser, many years ago, and we were talking about the specificity of the equipment. And obviously, I used it a ton with Mark Verstegen at Athletes Performance, and they developed so much together. But what's so cool about the Kaiser stuff is you can move at any speed, and you have constant resistance. So it really allows you to measure power. And no matter who you're working with, whether it be a geriatric patient trying to get out of a chair, or an athlete returning to football or soccer or explosive sports, it's really about power production. What's your motor unit recruitment like? What's your muscle mass like? How do those two things work together? Can you generate force to move your own body at the end of the day? So the load might vary, but at the end of the day, you all got to produce power. And I think we missed that even in the geriatric population a bit, where we kind of get too comfortable just doing really slow stuff, easy stuff. And then what does that create? Slow, easy results. So we'd like to see, hey, maybe think about challenging that in other ways and making them work a little harder. So great tool, great biofeedback tool, and produces the result for what we need. So
I think what you speak to is, one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Thank you, Stephen Covey. And, one of his habits was keep the end in mind. And our job as therapists is to make sure that we have the right carrot in front of the person. Is it attainable? Do they need to work hard to get it? And how close is it? Is it more of a short-term goal? Is it a long-term goal? I don't want to go into documentation, because we all know that just sucks. But there's a lot to be said for good short-term, long-term goals. And we have the right carrot in front of someone, and we say, stay focused. This is what I need you to do, whether it's 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I love that about the Kaiser. Match the other limb. Get 85% of the other limb. I love that about our tests. It is a very clear message to the patient. I think it's powerful when we show someone the scorecard and say, This is it. Now, this might seem daunting, but we have a long journey ahead of us, and we're going to tackle this step by step. And when they have that vision, it doesn't feel like you're swimming out to sea to an unknown island. We give you the map. The scorecard is the map, and it's clear as day. And that's what allows us to do this even from a distance. You know, it's really not so much about what's my hands do. You know, our hands just kind of help modulate tone, de-stress the tissue, have some fun, and chat about your weekend. Really, this is about your development and your journey, and this gives us the map.
Yeah. We do this through our virtual ACL program as well. It works out great. We can do it virtually. We can work with a client anywhere in the world and take them through the ACL progressions and then test them anywhere, because it's not requiring fancy equipment. Outside that Kaiser leg press is a little bit fancy. It's only going to cost you about $6 to 10 grand, but other than that,
that's part of the package.
Yeah, that's the elite package. Yeah. But all of the other tests can be done with a tape measure and some simple tools. So it's nice to be able to do that and really get a feel of where you're at. And really, at the end of the day, where you're at will then determine what you have to work on, and then put a program together for that. And that's what our virtual ACL rehab program is all about. So this has been good. That's kind of a summary of our scorecard. If you guys are interested in checking the scorecard out and seeing it digitally, we can definitely produce that. We'll see if we can throw that up on our YouTube channel, as well as social media, so you guys can take a look. Or if you need to request that, just hit us up on Instagram or any of the social channels to see. We're happy to share with you the PDF of what that kind of looks like, so you can reference it. But a phenomenal tool that we use on a regular basis to both drive patient engagement, therapist focus on where we're trying to accomplish, and ultimately get unsurpassed results. And we've had tremendous success with that. So
I think it kind of segues into another question as part of most of these discussions, which I love the most. It's a phenomenal question, as always with our profession. It's, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing? And it's tied to why are we training on like these uneven balancing surfaces? Last time I checked, that's my foot on the ground. It's pretty fucking solid. Unless you're a sailor, I'm pretty sure we need to start teaching me about how to put force into a solid surface.
So tell me all the toys that you use for unstable surface. What are all the toys out?
Yes, I'd love to. I think you need Bosu ball is pretty common.
Yeah,
What's
the one that feels like you're surfing? You know,
that's the Indo board.
Yeah.
They got the wobble boards, which is just like one plane. They got the Bosu balls. They got the AirX pads.
How about the good old fashioned one that's like what is that called? The Dynadisc? Is that what it is? Older than time.
Yeah.
Those are better if you actually do a sports league movement on them, like swinging a golf club or something.
Russ, one time you did, correct me if I'm wrong, you did a pistol squat on top of a kettlebell handle with another kettlebell in your hand.
You bet your ass I did.
Did you ever practice on your Bosu ball or on a kettlebell to accomplish that task?
I remember my first PT job, we had a Bosu ball, and I hopped on it, and I did a pistol squat, and I sat there, and I thought, this is so dumb. I've never been on one of these, and it's easy to do. Why would you ever train on something when if you have good balance, you can of course do it. Yeah. That like blew my mind, and I did the pistol squat on top of a kettlebell just for shits and giggles. I never practiced it, but I have good balance because I was a martial artist my whole life, which means I was barefoot from the age of 0 to 18. If you're barefoot for that long, you got some good balance. So the unstable. It just doesn't really work.
So this is what not to do. What are we saying to do then? What do we do? What's different? What do we do differently?
Yeah, I think that the big thing here to take away from this idea, and I don't think you see too many PT clinics in the country that don't have a Bosu ball, and I'm happy to say we don't have one. We don't have any unstable surfaces except for a foam pad that's just really to kneel on, though you wouldn't really stand on it. And the reason being is that, to Aaron's point, we're looking to how can we get the athlete to put force into the ground. So at the end of the day, if you look at how does someone move, how does force transfer? What keeps them healthy? What makes them amazing? Like what makes a guy like LeBron James or Jamal Murray at a killer game the other day with the Nuggets? Just phenomenal athlete. And just watch these guys change direction and how explosive they are and the things they can do. And it's really their ability to engage with a solid surface and then respond and react to it is really what we're looking for at the end of the day. So why would we put them on something unstable? And you guys can think about this. Take a golf club, take a golf swing, stay on a Bosu ball if you like, or stay on something unstable and take a swing. And you recognize that your brain will take away your lower extremity, and all you're going to do is just rotate the upper half, right? And that's exactly the opposite of the pattern we're trying to create, which is engage the ground, use the kinetic chain, use your kinetic force, and push to the ground in a solid way to engage and push off.
Well, it makes it kind of tough to use an ankle strategy. So not even just athletes, but just a typical human being that has to be stable on their feet. You initially use an ankle strategy with a perturbation. That's it.
Yep.
And then it goes to the hip, and then it goes to a drop strategy, which, you know, when you're poorly balanced, that's what you have to result to. But if you're training people to take away that first initial reliance, then you're kind of throwing the strategy upside down. And then there's a time and a place for an uneven surface. And if you want to challenge a certain part of your central nervous system, you want to take away your somatosensory feelings at the base of your feet, by all means, it's appropriate. But I think for our setting, where we're trying to teach people to be balanced and stable on a firm surface and let that translate to some athletic movement or some movement of life, I think we just reconsider the use of these strange objects.
I mean, Tony, you always, whenever you bring up the ice story, I love thinking about that. It's like, if you're doing rehab on unstable surface, why don't you go walk on ice? You know, good luck there.
Try to throw something when you're standing on ice, or run.
But to play devil's advocate here,
Please,
just for
yes.
a second,
Please.
I think we all firmly believe. I know I believe that there's no bad exercise. There's the wrong time for that.
Right.
So, are there maybe times where that could be something that we might use?
Yeah, I think I've seen some stuff in concussion management, to Aaron's point on central nervous system stuff. You know, when I was in school, I asked this question back in the day. Back in school, I was in ortho class. And the ortho instructor said, hey, you know, if you want to enhance someone's balance, stand on foam, right? You know, you practice your ankle strategy and stand on foam. And then, you know, an hour later, we were in neuro class, and the neuro teacher was teaching us. And the neuro teacher said, if you stand on foam, it takes away the proprioceptive system. Mm-hmm. So then I immediately raised my hand, like, can you guys have a meeting? Because I think we're having there's some conflict going on here, and I'd like some clarity, which didn't come out until quite a bit of research has been done now and actually shown that people who train on unstable surfaces have actually not produced strength gains compared to those who train on unstable surfaces. They took a squat group and they looked at athletes on unstable surfaces like foam or BOSU, or it wasn't BOSU, foam or Dynadisc, and then compared it to people that train on stable surfaces. And those who train on stable surfaces improved tremendously in their strength outputs and their power outputs, where the other groups stayed level and didn't improve at all. So I think that, again, from a strength and power standpoint, I think it's a bad idea. Perhaps from a balance or an awareness or just a wake up the system, kind of shock the system standpoint, provide a different stimulus. Of course, those things are welcome to be considered for those cases or those anomalies, but my recommendation would certainly be to get on solid ground first and get them to engage with the earth in the most natural way possible. And Darren's point, start with the feet bilateral together, start them, then move to tandem, then move to single leg, and then add perturbations with either a band or with just handheld perturbations to kind of stimulate. And if that's not getting you the result you want, then maybe you could go with something unstable to try to trigger the system and change it up and create a little bit of chaos in the environment. I think that's fair. We couldn't argue that athletics does not occur in chaos.
Not to open a can of worms, because we're right at the tail end. Maybe this is our next few episodes, but talking about feet, and these days we're kind of used to these big foam shoes, and to some degree you could say, right now people are inherently squatting on unstable surface when they come in with their big old, running kind of quote shoes, and usually our PT solution is either strip the shoes or bring a shoe that has a firmer sole that you can feel connect to the ground and doesn't have a squishy feeling. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on more from a training standpoint. If you're going to go for a run, there might be a time for a Hoka or something with a more softer sponge to help with impact. But you want to train balance, and we got a root, because that's what the best balanced people in the world are usually dancers and gymnasts. And they train on a wood balance beam, and they train on a wood floor, bare feet. And that's what we should be training to help improve stability. And I think that the neuromuscular games, you're doing something that you maybe aren't think as your primary intention.
Yeah. That's a big can of worms. And I think it warrants its own discussion. I'd love to talk about it another time.
Indeed. All right. Thank you all for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one. This was KIMEcast, and we are the Kime Human Performance Institute. Thank you very much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. Please hop on our social media. It's at KIMEHPI, and engage with us there. If you'd like us to feature a topic or answer any questions live on the show, post your comments there. You can also check us out on our website at kimeperformance.com, and there you can see links to content that we've posted throughout our podcast for more information.